Let's talk about the wall. The wall is basically the things or the obstacles that we run into that we can't always overcome or we feel like we can't overcome. This comes directly from a really interesting video that I've linked here. It was Randy Pausch's last lecture. It's called Achieving Your Childhood Dreams. He was a professor over at Carnegie Mellon. He was a computer science teacher and he was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer and unfortunately passed away 4 months after this lecture. But this was his last lecture, very famous. And ultimately, there's a number of great takeaways in terms of motivation in life. But I think my favorite part of this was talking about how walls stop most people, but not you. Walls exist to keep a lot of other people out. And the reality is, you need to remove it's not possible, it can't be done out of your mindset or out of your vocabulary in order to get further along in life. And I often find myself trying to coach or teach others, and it becomes very frustrating because there are many ways to deal with a problem like the wall. So you could walk around it, you could drill through it, you could dig under it, or with maybe some more abstract thinking, you can convince it to move out of the way. You could melt it with your superpowers, or maybe construct a fancy flying machine to get over it. Ultimately, the crazy part about a wall is there is another wall or another obstacle just beyond it. We all have to deal with these types of obstacles or barriers or instances of frustrations when we're in the job search. And the again motivator for me is if other people have figured it out, you certainly can too. So I think this gets at a really big theme, which is learning unlocks everything. The whole concept of getting better at doing these different types of activities within the job search is to increase your speed, which reduces your time, which ultimately could lead to more money, more opportunities, whatever. The whole concept behind that is trying new things makes you better and gets you better results. If you continuously do the same thing over and over and expect different results, obviously there isn't really a whole lot of value in trying to, I don't know, do things over and over on an incessant basis. I try to increase my outputs by learning things that are difficult and putting myself in a state of discomfort in order to get more value out of learning something, which either brings prestige or brings stability, depending on where and how you're applying it. Better solutions and better activities that get you results faster with less time is ultimately where satisfaction lives. I find motivation in learning because I feel like it unlocks all kinds of new avenues and new ways of getting around that wall. You need to find that motivation within you in order to get better at doing the job search or better at life in general. What I've often found is that unfortunately people have this weird thing that I call defaulting to the manual or default to manual. This happens to most people. So you learn a new skill or a new tactic or you pick up a new tool, you have faster output and it's a better quality, but then you hit a snag or you encounter a challenge. And for whatever reason, a lot of people will stop and revert back to whatever the most manual, simplest way of doing something is. You have to stick with this program in order to get better. You have to continue to put yourself into discomfort and uncomfortable things in order to excel. And there is no way of teaching that other than going through the motions and constantly overcoming obstacles and getting around different walls. So, the solutions that are presented in this course and in life in general are going to sometimes be a bit more complex. I try to break everything down to keep it really simple, but do not steer away from difficulty. This stuff is supposed to be hard. If it was easy, everyone would do it. I find that the beauty is in the details. Once you start working through things and you understand, oh, that's why this system works this way, I can apply that to other systems. Don't refuse to use any of the tools that I recommend just because they're complicated or at first they're hard. There are many ways of working around the walls or the obstacles, the barriers that you're going to encounter. Another mindset shift that I often try to encourage people to get into the mindset of thinking about is trying to avoid robotic thinking. Robots can't think, you can. So I was having beers with a an old founder friend of mine, and he used to teach a number of computer science courses to really young kids that were just getting into programming. And he used to have this example of making a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. And the way that you would have to program the person in order to make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich is to literally write out every single step along the way. And invariably, you would see kids having meltdowns because it was like, wait, so I stick the knife in the peanut butter and I pull it out, but there's no peanut butter on it. And it gets to this level of like kids like, no, you had to turn it's this whole thing. So the reality is, I used to have this expression about grabbing me a beer out of the fridge. Either way, the whole concept here is sometimes you need to make these leaps on your own and try things that don't necessarily have clear pathways. Read between the lines, think for yourself. Almost everything in this course is spelled out for you, but there are going to be areas that you have to make an extra leap of faith, of I don't know, of thinking in order to get to a point where you're able to accomplish what you need to in order to get to the other side. So this brings up the Dunning-Kruger effect, which is basically like the whole concept of how you learn and how we as people get good at something. So it starts out really easy when you first encounter either a new activity, a new game, a new skill, and you don't feel that great about it. And within a very short time, you're like, oh, dude, I totally get this. And once you realize the depth of whatever task, project, skill you're trying to accomplish, you very quickly realize, like, oh shit, like there's a lot that I don't understand here. A lot of people get stuck in the valley of despair. And that is unfortunately where a lot of people just leave new hobbies, new activities. And I think a lot of people exist on the peak of Mount Stupid, where they think they understand everything through and through without much of depth in general. It's only until we start working through and understanding how these things function and the ins and outs that we actually get better overall and become experts in one particular skill or a process or a workflow or job search. So ultimately, this is a long way to go to say, please work through the difficult parts and understand that everything that we're building here is reusable. We're building on top of things in order to get better, to be faster, in order to execute more and more often. Some parts of this course are going to seem repetitive in nature. I promise it all will make sense, and every chapter does build on to the next, and all the resources that you're putting time into are reusable. I think one of the biggest challenges that I've seen as somebody that's managed teams as large as 30 is that the biggest demotivator in managing people is ultimately when none of their work gets used. Everything that we go through here will get reused, I promise, whether it's to train a model with an AI or it's a chance to put it out into the world or give it to somebody that is reviewing it in order to give you a job. It all exists for a reason.